Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be covering how to retarget between RapidRig and other third-party skeletons. So there's kind of two methods we can retarget, and I'll break this up into two videos. And the first one is going to be taking an existing skeleton and maybe a mesh that's skinned to it and bolting that onto a RapidRig. And that way you can animate that skeleton using all of the good stuff that comes with RapidRig. So for example, I've taken Manny here from Unreal Engine, and you can see that Unreal, if you export out of Unreal, you get the skeleton and the mesh. So I can go ahead and, see that this Manny is skinned, but I don't have a rig for it. And so you may want to animate in Unreal using Control Rig, but you may prefer to use Maya and use RapidRig. So what we want to be able to do is animate Manny with RapidRig, and we don't want to go through a ton of process to do that. So I already have the mesh and the bones here. I don't want to have to build all that from scratch again and do all the skinning again or anything crazy like that. So what I can do instead is build a rig that lines up with Manny's skeleton and then attach that custom skeleton, whether it's Manny or whatever other skeleton that you want to attach, and then animate RapidRig, and it'll move those joints around for me. So I've gone ahead and created proxies that line up with Manny here. So we can see if I toggle off and on the joints, you can see they line up pretty close. And I'm going to go ahead and generate my rig here. So go ahead, generate. And we can choose whether to create a single hierarchy joint chain or not, and whether to use Unreal Engine naming. You don't need to do this unless you really want to. I'm going to turn this on just to show both ways of doing it. Again, it'll work either way. It'll just provide you an option later on. So I'm going to go ahead and generate my rig. And I've also chose to use Unreal naming, but again, you don't have to do that. It's just going to do kind of a one-to-one. All right, so now that the rig is complete, right, I can move the rig around like I normally would. There it is. And there's all my controls. Now, currently, this custom skeleton that I've brought in does not move with the rig. So this is where we're at now, where we want to actually get that moving with RapidRig. So to do that, I'm going to go over to my joint settings now, and we have this attach custom skeleton. So there's two options here we can choose from. We have attach custom skeleton to RRM3 rig, and we can attach RRM3 rig to custom skeleton. So for the first video here, we're going to be talking about this option here, attach custom skeleton to RRM3 rig. And that's to do what we described. This option here is if we have motion capture data that we want to apply to our rig and bake it down, but that's for next video. So I'm going to just go with this option, and I'm going to click on create RM3 skeleton attach mapping. I'll move the main RapidRig window over because it brought up this new window that I'm going to use. So here we need to do a couple things first. We're going to load in which rig we want to attach that skeleton to. So I'm going to grab just any control, doesn't really matter what, and I'll go load RM3 rig. And then the next thing we have is to only match to the RM3 joints within a distance tolerance. And what this means is if we kind of look at the rig here, there's a bunch of extra joints on Manny that are sort of floating a little bit away from anything that exists on RapidRig. Now I could have gone and created all these extra auxiliaries and all that stuff for the rig, but I just want to animate the main set of joints, and so I don't have a one-to-one for these. And how the mapping will work by default is it will find the nearest joint from this custom skeleton to the RapidRig skeleton. And in cases of a joint like this, right, this should probably follow its parent joint here, but because it's closer in proximity to, say, the shoulder, that's probably where it will attach to, and we probably don't want that in this case. So what we could do is turn on this tolerance or threshold, and this is 1 unit in Maya, so if you're not sure how big that is, go ahead and just create a cube, and the width of that cube with geo on is how big 1 unit is. And so I might turn this down, maybe let's do 0.25. That way it gives me a little bit of tolerance or error in case something's not exactly matched, but it should ignore the mapping to all these extra ones. So the next thing I want to do is when I'm ready to map is I will select the joints I want. So I'm going to go ahead and find the root joint, and I can go select hierarchy, or I can go in and expand and select the ones I want. So I could do that, or I can simply just click this and you'll be presented with an option. Do you want to map the selected joints only, or map all descendants? So that means everything underneath it. I'm going to choose map all descendants. And then here we're going to get this option. So if you chose when you generated the rig to create the single hierarchy skeleton, you will now get that option. So you could choose either one. I'm going to go ahead and choose the single hierarchy skeleton, but really it shouldn't make a difference based on the settings I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and then I'll take a second or two, and then it's going to populate the left side will be your custom skeleton joints, and on the right is a drop down of all the ones you can map it to. And you can see that it's gone through and done the mapping for you. One thing to be aware of is just watch out with the scroll wheel because it will scroll through. So if you're going to scroll, just move over to the side. And if I'm not sure what these are, so let's say I'm like trying to find, oh, okay, where's neck one? I can click this button, it'll select neck one, and then whatever this is set to, it'll select that joint there. So you can see that selected neck one, neck two, neck top, root, all that. I can click the minus button if I want to remove a joint, so I don't want it to be mapped anymore. If you shift click, it'll clear the whole list. You can do a fresh new mapping, maybe with a different tolerance. And you can see as we scroll down that there are a bunch of these set to none. So if I click on lower arm in L, we see that that joint didn't find a joint to map to on RRM3 that was within that tolerance. So that's why I set to none. We can see a whole bunch of them are set to none, but most of the important ones like the metacarpals and the lower arm and all these things are mapped basically where we want them to be. Now we also have this maintain offset. And what that does is when you create the attachment, you can choose whether to maintain their relative position and then attach, like let's say there's a bit of a gap here. We keep that gap between the joints. I generally recommend keeping the maintain offset on because otherwise it may distort the character a little bit and leave any intentional gaps or separations that you left, and then could create some issues. So generally I recommend leaving these on, but you can turn them on, and if you press the shift click, you can say, set all checkboxes to off and then turn whichever one's on. So I'll go ahead and set all checkboxes. So you could do it one at a time, go through and specify specifically. Okay, and so now that I have that and I've set all this up, I'm going to let's say I want to do this in another scene, or I want to come back to this. I can save my mapping to a file. And so I'm just going to call this my mani attach or something like that. And I'm going to hit save. And so let's say I went back and actually just clear it all. So I'm going to click the shift button here to remove all. And I'm going to go ahead and remap it. So I'm going to go ahead and choose, I'm going to turn off this tolerance actually so we can see a difference. So I'm going to say map selected joints. I'm going to say all descendants again, and I'll choose my single hierarchy again, and then there we go. So you can see that it tried to find the nearest joint for all those. So like for example, the lower arm mapped to the elbow this time. And so I can create this initial mapping, and now what I could do is, like, let's say I just set I set these to none. Actually, let's do it I'll just set a few of these to just random things by using my scroll wheel. So now they're different. And so what I can do is load my mapping. And there we go. So you can see it set everything back to the way it was. And then, yeah, if you have another scene where your characters are similar, like you want to do it to the Quinn version or whatever, you can, load that mapping in for there. It'll also remember your maintain offsets and things like that too. Okay, so then before we actually do our attachment, we're going to decide if we want to connect scale channels. Now, if you're working with like a single hierarchy chain, this can be a little bit weird. You might get some joint skewing where if the parent joint scales non-uniformly, it can cause a weirdness. So up to you on whether you want to try turning that on or off. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And then when I'm ready, I'll just hit attach custom skeleton to RRM3 rig, and it'll use all the settings here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and it will ask you, are you sure? This will break connections. So I'm going to go ahead and hit proceed and break connections. And so now we could see that Manny is attached to Rapid Rig. So I can go in and switch this over to IK, and now we can animate Manny and IK, and I can do all my cool, fun, squashy, stretchy things with Manny as well, because why not? And there we go. So we have Manny bolted on, and then so what you can do is go ahead and create your animation, do whatever you want to do, and then export that animation as your FBX or whatever, and bring that into Unreal.